I was in my mid-20s the first time I realized that I could be replaced by a robot. At the time, I was working as a financial reporter covering Wall Street and the stock market, and one day I heard about this new AI reporting app. Basically, you just feed in some data like a corporate financial report or a database of real estate listings, and the app would automatically strip out all the important parts, plug it into a news story, and publish it with no human input required. Now, these AI reporting apps, they weren't going to win any Pulitzer Prizes, but they were shockingly effective. Major news organizations were already starting to use them, and one company said that its AI reporting app had been used to write 300 million news stories in a single year, which is slightly more than me, and probably more than every human journalist on Earth combined. For the last few years, I've been researching this coming wave of AI and automation, and I've learned that what happened to me that day is happening to workers in all kinds of industries, no matter how seemingly prestigious or high-paid their jobs are. Doctors are learning that machine learning algorithms can now diagnose certain types of cancers more accurately than they can. Lawyers are going up against legal AIs that can spot issues in contracts with better precision than them. Recently at Google, they ran an experiment with an AI that trains neural networks, essentially a robot that makes other robots. And they found that these AI-trained neural networks were more accurate than the ones that their own human programmers had coded. But the most disturbing thing I learned in my research is that we've been preparing for this automated future in exactly the wrong way. For years, the conventional wisdom has been that if technology is the future, then we need to get as close to the technology as possible. We told people to learn to code and to study hard skills like data science, engineering, and math. Because all those soft skills people, those artists and writers and philosophers, they were just going to end up serving coffee to our robot overlords. But what I learned was that essentially the opposite is true. Rather than trying to compete with machines, we should be trying to improve our human skills, the kinds of things that only people can do, things involving compassion and critical thinking and moral courage. And when we do our jobs, we should be trying to do them as humanely as possible. For me, that meant putting more of myself in my work. I stopped writing formulaic corporate earnings stories, and I started writing things that revealed more of my personality. I started a financial poetry series. I wrote profiles of quirky and interesting people on Wall Street, like the barber who cuts people's hair at Goldman Sachs. I even convinced my editor to let me live like a billionaire for a day, wearing a $30,000 watch and driving around in a Rolls Royce, flying in a private jet. Tough job, but someone's got to do it. And I found that this new human approach to my job made me feel much more optimistic about my own future. Because you can teach a robot to summarize the news or to write a headline that's going to get a lot of clicks from Google or Facebook, but you can't automate making someone laugh with a dumb limerick about the bond market or explaining what a collateralized debt obligation is to them without making them fall asleep. And as I researched more, I found so many more examples of people who had succeeded this way by refusing to compete with machines and instead making themselves more human. Take Russ. Russ Garofalo is my accountant. He helps me with my taxes every year. And as you can probably tell from the photo, Russ is not a traditional accountant. He's a former stand-up comedian, and he brings his comedic sensibility to his work. I swear I've had more fun talking about itemized deductions with Russ than at actual comedy shows that I've paid real money to see. Russ knows that in the age of TurboTax, the only way for human accountants to stay relevant is bringing something to the table other than tax expertise. So he started a company called Brass Taxes. Get it? He hired a bunch of other funny and personable accountants, and he started looking for clients in creative industries who would appreciate the value of having a human being walk them through their taxes. Now, technically, I should be very worried about Russ, because tax preparation is a highly automation-prone industry. In fact, according to an Oxford University study, it has a 99% chance of being automated. But I'm not worried about Russ. because he's figured out a way to turn tax preparation from a chore into an entertaining human experience that lots of people, including me, are willing to pay for. Or take Mitsuru Kawai. 60 years ago, Mitsuru started as a junior trainee at a Toyota factory in Japan. He made car parts by hand. And this was the 1960s, an era when the auto industry was undergoing a huge technological transformation. The first factory robots had started coming onto the assembly lines, and a lot of people were worried that auto workers were going to become obsolete. Mitsuru decided to focus on what, in Japanese, is called monozukuri, basically human craftsmanship. He studied all the nuanced, intricate details of auto design, and he developed these kind of sixth sense skills that few of his other colleagues had. He could listen to a machine and tell when it was about to break, or look at a piece of metal and figure out what temperature it was just by what shade of orange it was glowing. Eventually, Mitsuru's bosses noticed that he had all these skills that his coworkers didn't, and they made him really valuable because he could work alongside the robots, filling in the gaps, doing the things that they couldn't do. He kept getting promoted, and just this year, Mitsuru Kawai was named Toyota's first ever Chief Monozukuri Officer. In recognition of the 60 years that he spent teaching Toyota workers that even in a highly automated industry, their human skills still matter. Or take Marcus Books. Marcus Books is a small, independent, Black-owned bookstore in my hometown of Oakland, California. It's a pretty amazing place. It's the oldest Black-owned bookstore in America, and for 60 years, it's been introducing Oaklanders to the work of people like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou. But the most amazing thing about Marcus Books is that it's still here. So many independent bookstores have gone out of business in the last few decades because of Amazon or the internet. So how did Marcus Books do it? Well, it's not because they have the lowest prices or the slickest e-commerce setup or the most optimized supply chain. It's because Marcus Books is so much more than a bookstore. It's a community gathering place where generations of Oaklanders have gone to learn and grow. It's a safe place where Black customers know that they're not going to be followed around or patted down by a security guard. As Blanche Richardson, one of the owners of Marcus Books, told me, it just has good vibes. Earlier this year, Marcus Books temporarily closed. And like a lot of businesses, its future was uncertain. It was raising money through a GoFundMe page, and then George Floyd was killed. The streets filled with protests, and orders poured in to Marcus Books from all over the country. First 100 books a day, then 200, then 300. Today, they're selling 5 times as many books as they were before the pandemic. And their GoFundMe page has raised more than $250,000. And if you look at the comments on its GoFundMe page, you can see why Marcus Books has survived all these years. One person wrote that we have a duty to preserve gems like this in our community. Someone else said, I've been going to Marcus Books since I was a child, and Blanche Richardson showed me many kindnesses. Gems. Kindnesses. Those aren't words about technology. They're not even words about books. They're words about people. The thing that saved Marcus Books was how they made their customers feel. An experience, not a transaction. If you, like me, sometimes worry about your own place in an automated future, you have a few options. You can try to compete with the machines. You can work long hours. You can turn yourself into a sleek, efficient productivity machine. Or you can focus on your humanity and doing the things that machines can't do. Bringing all those human skills to bear on whatever your work is. If you're a doctor, you can work on your bedside manner so that your patients come to see you as their friend rather than just their medical provider. If you're a lawyer, you can work on your trial skills and your client interactions rather than just cranking out briefs and contracts all day. If you're a programmer, you can spend time with the people who actually use your products, figure out what their problems are and try to solve them, rather than just hitting next quarter's growth targets. That's how we become future-proof. Not by taking on the machines, but by excelling in the areas where humans have a natural advantage. By living and working more like humans, we can make ourselves impossible to replace. And the good news is that we don't have to learn a single line of code or deploy a single algorithm. In fact, you already have everything you need. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Hope you're all doing fine. Good evening. So today is our last class, and I think I'm filled with mixed feelings that probably after today we may not meet on this forum. Probably we'll then meet under different business conditions. But let's just get through with our class of today. Then maybe we could discuss all of that. So today we are tending more towards leadership and organization. And as you could see on our slide, we'll be looking at ethical challenges in automation and organization leadership and culture. Having gone through all what we needed from week 1, from week 1 up to this point, it's good to know and think about the professionals we are all becoming at the end of this class. We ask ourselves this question as we close this week. What does an ethical data professional look like in practice? Going beyond the theory we have been discussing, what do we need to do, or what do we do when our institution around us falls short of ethical practice when it comes to data? So we are going to cover the ethics of automation and automated decision-making process. We'll be looking at when human oversight is not just preferable but ethically mandatory. We'll be looking at what happens to people and not really jobs. The entire focus have been on jobs. Well, when AI comes in, automation comes in, what happens to the jobs? But we'll be looking at what happens to the people when automation displaces human work. We'll be examining what it takes to build an ethical organization culture beyond policy documents. Yes, we are used to policy documents. Probably at the end of this class of this week, you go back to the organization and ask for several policy documents to be rewritten. But what happened beyond policy documents and compliance checklists? A lot of us are compliance officers in your various firms. What can you do beyond the checklist? And most especially, the hardest question as a professional you would ask in this field: what do you do when you know that something is wrong and the organization does not want you to say so? What do you do in that case? We have a very interesting case study we should be looking at. Frances Haugen, she was a data scientist at one of the most powerful social media companies in the world. She had several documentation, she had courage, and she was able to change a global conversation about platform accountability. That's a case study we'll be looking at when we go through our LMS. And when we go through that case study, we'll discover that individual ethical action actually matters. What do you do in that case? Do you resign from the company? Do you write a disclaimer note that could save as a basis for your actions sometimes in future when you are forced to do things unethically, or maybe in the data process you have discovered some flaws that need not to be, And of course, you need to still retain your job. What do? Do you keep quiet? And we have a slide that we are going to look at that talks about that. So, and as usual, we have an assignment, a reflective study, and a group question and answers, which we have to carry on through the class. So we move over to our slide. We'll be looking at automation and ethical decision-making process, humans versus automation. We'll be looking at displacements, how to build an ethical culture, leadership and ethical accountability, whistleblowing policies, very, very important, whistleblowing and policies and professional ethics. Then we'll be analyzing the entire 8-week into one as a kind of a take-home. A very important question we ask ourselves: at what point do we allow the machines to take over our work? At what point do we allow machines to take over our work? That is a very important question. The question is not really if a machine can make the decision accurately. The question should always be, should a machine make this decision at all? Most times we tend to leave our decision-making processes to platforms we have built as humans, and much of it, we leave decisions in their hands. A lot of talks have been going on now with airplanes. Because airplanes have what we generally know as autopilot. But some of us may not be aware of the exact situation and time when autopilot takes charge of the airplanes. For instance, if you study through, the physical pilot must take charge of the plane at its most critical phases. That is the takeoff and the landing. Autopilot in airplane generally comes in and kicks in during what is known as the cruise altitude. That is when a plane has reached an altitude of probably 15,000 to 20,000 feet, 10,000 feet. That's the cruise altitude. That is when the autopilot kicks in. Sometimes during turbulence, autopilot is also left to make the decision. But at other times, the human pilot must take charge of the plane. There have been several talks in the world of today asking, and plane makers are now trying to think, why can't we use robots, or why can't robots take charge of the critical phases of airplane? And I think some of us may not want to be among the test tool that will be in that phase where you go over to an airplane, and apart from the hostesses, you'll now be told that a robot is flying the plane, taking charge of the most critical phase, that is takeoff and landing. And personally, I wouldn't want to be there because I can't imagine what goes wrong if a line of code is broken. In fact, let's analyze a case. Remember when Boeing 737 came into existence? When that plane was manufactured, remember the case of Ethiopian Airline? I've forgotten the other airline. There were fatal crashes in that plane. 2 fatal crashes before the plane was taken out of circulation. That is Boeing 737 Max. What happened? When investigation went on, it was clearly said, and I remember that report because I read it over and over again. It was said that it was an error in the codes, because Boeing 737 Max at that time was built to ensure stability during turbulence. And the code that was written such that when the airplane is to get stable, the code should stabilize the plane without the help of the pilot. But there was an error. What was the error? The error in the code told the plane to tilt down even when the pilot is trying to stabilize it. In fact, the code overrode the human that is the human capacity of the pilot. And because of that, when the plane is tilting down, the pilot is trying to manually take over and override that function, but the code unintentionally made sure the plane still stalls. And what was the result? Crashes occurred twice. Twice. And that is a very good case study when you ask yourself, should a machine actually make some critical decisions? Accuracy and legitimacy are two different things. Accuracy and legitimacy, they are not the same thing. Being accurate does not mean that it is legitimate. We have, in full human decisions, it must come in when the stakes are high. When a decision cannot be reversed, human decision must come in. In the case of sentencing, remember our week, I think that should be week 2 or week 3, when we looked at the algorithm that was used to sentence people and also give us the likelihood that someone. Please, Okelo, I see your hand is raised. Okay. I think let me do something. Okay, so it should be better now. I'm using the share screen function. Okay, so like I was saying, remember when we talked about the justice system, when an algorithm was written in a software on a likelihood that a discharged felon is likely to commit the crime again, and due to error in the code, it was predicting that blacks that were being acquitted would likely commit that crime over the whites. In such scenario, full human decisions must come in. Though there'll be a risk of inconsistency and being slow, but accountability and explainability is very important in those cases. So when there are high risk stakes, when the decision to be taken is irreversible, human decisions must come in fully. Now, when do you put humans in the loop? When AI surfaces recommendation, when humans also have to review and approve, when we have what is called content moderation escalation, credit approval, loan decisions, humans must come in. Then we talk about full automation. In fact, generally, I always recommend you only automate routine processes. Let's take, for instance, in car manufacturing plants. As each vehicle is moving through the survey belt, paint of a certain color is meant to be mixed and sprayed on the car in what we call oven bake. And you have to produce 3 vehicles every hour. It's just all about spray painting. Of course, that is a routine exercise that is leading to a lot of human effort. You automate that process. So full automation comes in when it is a routine job, routine processes that takes a lot of human strength and human processes that could lead to error. When decisions can be reversed, when it is low-stake decisions with high volume, mark that word, low-stake decisions with high volumes you can automate. For instance, we have what is called spam filtering. Emails are coming into your email box. A lot of people are sending in spams that will spam you. At that point, you can automate with spam filters. The mail service providers are doing that. Price adjustments, probably due to time of purchase, due to maybe the period, Black Friday, Easter Monday, inventory reordering, automation can come in fully. In that case, humans must not always make those recurring decisions. But when it has to deal with high stakes, please, high stake decisions should never at any time be taken by machines. That is when we come in as leaders. Automation is not just an economic issue, it is also an ethical issue. We ask ourselves most times what jobs will be lost, but also ask yourself, what happens? So we ask ourselves, what happens when people lose their job? What happens to their identity? What happens to their dignity when their work is taken from them, and who bears the responsibility? Now with AI, you can build platforms, build softwares, build a lot of things, and most organizations will now say, okay, we have to shut down jobs from this area. For instance, just today, we saw, is it Meta? There's a particular company that just laid off about 4,000 workers. The workers just came to the office and they discovered that they couldn't get access to their mail. They couldn't get access to their laptop. What has happened? Automation has replaced them. The question should be, what happens to their sense of purpose? What happens to their identity? Who bears responsibility when their entire world is taken away from them? Because work is not just the outcome. Community is broken. GDP statistics is harmed. Who bears the cost when automation takes people's job? Unemployment comes in, it falls on workers, and what happens in that stage? You now see increase in crime because of decisions that were taken due to automations. There must always be a balance. There's a popular saying said by a particular school of thought, and I'll just say it. I'll take an instance when a road construction is about to occur. Let's say road construction is to occur in a community, and the construction company knows that by to solve the issue of a recurring tax of, let's say, mixing of the ratio of the cement to be used for the road construction, they could use the machines and do that mixing faster. What they could accomplish in a week, they could accomplish in a day. I'm just giving an instance. Now, they have the option of involving the locals of the community in that job. And involving the locals of the community is going to solve unemployment problem at least for 3 years when that project will last. There comes the question, should we automate that process and have issues with the community, maybe riots and claims and all sorts of things, or should we get in the community to do this job and have issues with production time? That is a very important question. If you automate, 3 people remains unemployed. If you employ 3,000 people, if you employ the 3,000 people, what's the resultant effect? Our job gets delayed by probably 1 year. Using the principle of ethical consideration, you could always come to a middle standpoint. Instead of employing maybe 3,000 people, you could look at it. Let's employ 500 and allow the machines. Okay, let's employ 500 and allow the machines to take the decision and do the job of 2,005. Or let's employ 1,005 and allow the machines to do the job of the other 1,005. So we come to a midpoint. That is a very good decision. Now, we have what we call dignity in automated systems, just like what I've explained. Even when humans remain in the workforce, automation changes the nature of work. Workers are being monitored by algorithms, paced by systems, and evaluated by machines. They experience loss of professional autonomy and dignity, and that matters ethically. We must retrain that myth. In fact, most times we usually canvas train the workers instead of replacing them. Train the workers instead of replacing them, because when the ships are down, you will still fall back to humans. Automation should not fully replace the workers. Ethics is a culture and not a policy. An organization must have the perfect data ethics policy. Whenever people come to organization, whenever the compliance officers come in, most times you take them to your reception, you point them there, telling them, we have a policy on data retention, we have a policy on this, we have a policy on cybersecurity, but is that embedded in your culture as an organization? Do your people actually know what data privacy means? Do they know what data security means? As a leader and a professional, you should be able to translate policy to culture so that even a staff on the lowest rung of the organizational chart understands what data privacy laws is all about, and they can explain it in clear terms. What is data privacy? Why do we need data privacy? Why must we be careful when using automation? From the top to the bottom, leaders must signal that throughout the organization. Employees must feel safe to raise concerns, ethical concerns, without retaliation. There must be ethics applied in incentives. Now we have talked about ethics. When incentives are being distributed, when promotion comes in, it shouldn't just be tied solely to performance metrics. Why? You must also tie it to ethical conduct. Because you could have a case study whereby there are some workers that constantly show up, but within the scope of their job, it may be very difficult to measure their performance metrics when they are paid against maybe, okay, let's assume we are looking at the security staff and you are looking at those in the production factory. It is very easy to assume that the staff in the production factory, they are performing far better, hitting their KPIs above that in the security. If they are being paid side by side, how do you rate it? So most times the praises are usually given to those where the effects of their job are visibly noticeable. But when you now want to apply ethics to what you are doing, you'll be able to look at both job at the face value they belong to. You'll be able to apply some people so where we call pay per hour. Pay per hour in some people is not just about the salary, it's about fairness. It's about fairness. Paying per hour means that as an executive, you spend 1 hour on the job. As a lower executive, you spend 1 hour on the job. There's a payment that accrues for spending equal time aside where we now come to professionalism. There must be ongoing education and ongoing training to our employees. Very importantly, there must be a clear escalation path. Employees must know where exactly to go when they observe something wrong, not just in theory, but in practice. And they must be sure that the path that leads to genuine investigation must be trusted. When senior leaders violate ethical standards, there must be consequence. Accountability should not just apply to people that are not leaders. Accountability must also apply to senior leaders. There must be a framework for ethical decisions under pressure. In practice, ethical decisions are made under time pressure, most times with incomplete information. We must be able to have a proper framework. First of all, what is happening? The situation with the framework we develop, we should be able to name the situation precisely. Who was affected when this data was breached? What data was involved? What decision is being made? Who are the stakeholders? There's a data issue. Who are the stakeholders involved? Not just the organization. It must not be all about the organization. What about the individuals whose data was affected? What about the future users? What about the marginalized groups? What do our frameworks say? Remember, we talked about several ethical frameworks, unitarianism that has to do with the greatest good. We talked about deontology. that has to do with rights being violated. Then we talked about ethics. That is virtue, ethics. What will the person of integrity do? So we must have a framework for making ethical decisions when under pressure and when not under pressure. Now, when institutions fail, what should be our obligations? When your institution don't have the relevant framework for data, this has to do with whistleblowing. What should be your own obligations? Data professionals, they are increasingly facing situations where their organizations pursue data practices that are known to be harmful, but unethical or illegal. We saw the other case where blood samples were taken from people of a community without full disclosure on what their blood samples would be used. Probably there were some individuals in the organization that felt that this was not right. What can they do in that case? The law of the company may say that no staff can go to the media without prior authorization of the company. In fact, some companies will tell you that any interaction with the media must be done via the company's chief media officer. And the chief media officer have been authorized to say that you only say what has been given to you, what has been written as a script. Now, as an employee, as a leader, as a data compliance officer, you have seen what is wrong, and the law says this. But what do integrity demands? What would you do? What are your options? I just put in about 4 options. Number 1, always raise the concerns internally through your manager, through your line officer, through your ethics officer, or a formal reporting channel. And most importantly, when using such concerns, it must be fully documented on pen and paper. I do tell my colleagues and my staff in my organization, I tell my staff, anything that is not written down does not exist. I follow that policy. When coming for any meeting, when coming for any briefing, I tell my colleagues at where I lecture, and I tell my staff in the office, you must come with a notepad. If you are coming for any meeting with me, and it has to do with decision making process, and it has to do with process flow, in my organization, my people would always see me with a notepad compulsorily. And I tell them, if you don't have a notepad, this meeting is ended. When you have a notepad, you can come back. And when I tell my people notepad, I'm not referring to your phones where you take notes on your phones. No. Because what happens if that phone dies? Come with a physical notepad, document every process. When you document it on pen and paper, you can then translate it to digital format. Documentation is key when you have internal decisions and when you are escalating. Documentation could be in the form of email. You send an email to your line manager, I noticed this. First of all, that email has achieved 2 things. I've escalated and I have it on paper in case of eventualities tomorrow. If internal dissent is ignored, escalate to leadership, to the board, to the legal unit, to the audit unit. Go on record. What are the risks? Maybe your career. But before you do that, always know your legal protection. We have last week in a university in a particular country, some lecturers were sacked for 10 years and they recently got judgment from the industrial court asking the university to reinstate them and pay them their arrears for the past 10 years, pay them damages for the emotional damage that was caused, but the damage is now financial. You must know what the law says as regarding what you are about to do. In case you are shown the boot out, what do the law say about that? Refuse to participate in conduct that are ethically wrong. What are the risks? Maybe termination. And also, you must be able to establish in your organization, if you're a leader, a whistleblowing policy. Whatever we are doing and what we have done in our entire 8 weeks, translates to one question. Having passed through this entire course, I'll ask us this question. Most of us came up probably for your program purpose, to get your marks, to get your grades. But I'll leave us with this. What kind of data professional do you want to be? What kind of data professional do you want to be? And what kind of data world would you want to help build? What kind of automation systems would you want to be part of? How do you want to apply ethics to your day-to-day living? In week 1, we talked about the foundation, where we said that ethics is not just compliance, but it is a commitment to human dignity in every data decision. In week 2, we looked at governance, and the summary of week 2 is that governance structures only protect people when they reach actual decisions and not just policy documents. In week 3, we looked at what the law has to say as regarding ethics. And we said that the law sets the floor and ethics demand that we always aim higher. Week 4, we looked at the principle of fairness. And we said that even if we cannot satisfy all definition of fairness simultaneously, we should choose and consciously defend our choice of fairness based on what we understand. Week 5, we looked at quality. And we saw that bad data is a justice issue. Representation is not just optional. Week 6, we looked at security. And we were able to pinpoint that security failures are organizational choices, because every unpatched vulnerability was actually a decision that was made. And I showed us the case of Equifax. There was a decision, a flaw was discovered, fix it, a decision was made that we should ignore it for now. Week 7, we talked about data sovereignty. That was last week, data sovereignty. And we were able to highlight that data don't just belong to the organizations, the IT firms. We were able to conclude and evaluate that data belongs to the communities and the data respondents themselves. And we saw that extraction of data without benefit is a form of harm. Today and this week, we are concluding with culture. We started with ethics and culture. We're concluding with that. And we are concluding that ethics is what we do when no one is watching and when nothing legal is required. That is ethics as a culture. And that is what we need to build in to ourselves and build in to our organization. Ethics is culture. Our case study for this week, as you would see on the LMS in the assignment, we'll be looking at Frances Haugen. She was a Facebook whistleblower. What did she do? She was a data scientist and product manager at Facebook who worked on civic integrity issues, specifically preventing election interference and reducing harm from misinformation on the platform. What did she discover? She discovered internally that Facebook research showed that the platform knew, that is, Facebook knew, mark that word knew, Facebook was fully aware that its Instagram products cause serious mental health harm to teenage girls because its algorithm amplified divisive content for engagement, and that the integrity teams were constantly overruled by growth and revenue policies. Let me just break down that grammar. What do you think happened there? Now, because of profit reasons, Facebook developed that algorithm that amplified content for engagement that causes harm to teenage girls, probably sharing of pictures, probably sharing of information. Because the more of those informations that come up, or the more information comes up, the more revenue were escalated. People kept telling the Facebook leadership team that this is harmful. How did they know it is harmful? Maybe suicides were being committed. Maybe there were some incidences of abuse and violation to the ladies. And by investigation, it was discovered that Facebook, they were aware of this. And the integrity team raised issues to the company, but those issues were overruled because we must make gain. Revenue must come in. Now, what did she do? What did she do that make us to study this at this time and use her as a case study? What did she do? Before leaving Facebook, she copied thousands of internal documents, disclosed this to the Security and Exchange Commission in United States, disclosed it to the United States Congress and the Wall Street Journal. And all these documents were published in what we call Facebook Files investigation. She eventually testified before the US Senate in October 2021. What are the ethical dimensions here? Her actions were simultaneously a professional risk, a legal risk, and an act of institutional accountability. She used the 6-step ethical decision framework, which is she named the arm, she identified the stakeholders, escalation was done internally, and she was ignored. When she did that, she went external when the internal channels failed. What is her key lesson? One data professional with documentation and courage changed a global policy conversation, showing us that individual ethical action matters, even inside the largest institution. This is a closing thought letter to every one of us before we go to our discussion and end the class of today. We are actually going to face moments when our ethical choice is inconvenient. When the data says something our organization wouldn't want to hear. And when a system we have built in your organization is causing harm which you didn't intend, someone in your organization may ask you to look the other way when you bring up these issues. In those moments, I'm believing that this course should give us a foundation. In those moments, I believe that you should be able to know what fairness demands and that multiple definitions of fairness actually exists. In those moments, remember that even when Facebook and WhatsApp, like some days ago now, Facebook and WhatsApp brought up a policy just asking us to accept. They told us to be aware that people not on our contact will now see our status and we are going to see status of others. And they just told us to be aware that advertisements will now come up on our status, leaving us with no option than to accept, because if we don't accept, you can't use WhatsApp. At that point, you should know that there are definite and multiple definitions of fairness. At that moment, you know what consent requires and how most mechanisms fall short of it. We already know what governance stands for and when it's working and when it isn't working. Through this course for 8 weeks now, we have known what harm is caused when data quality fails and when security is neglected, when sovereignty is ignored. We should know this, that knowledge is useless if we don't use it. Knowledge is only as useful as when it is used. Ethics is not what you know, but ethics is what you do. I'm challenging every one of us that we should build and go for something that is worth being accounted for. Before we take our takeaway for this course, I would like to get our feedback. Please, let's all be able to interact today. We are ending the course today, so let's just share ideas. Let's get our feedback. as suggestions going forward. In fact, we are going to make a personal commitment. Those of us in the class, let's hear from every one of us what our personal commitment to data would be, data security, data privacy, and as an individual, as an institution, what do you actually commit to doing? We share our thoughts generally, and we'll take our closing. This actually our closing words. We'll then end the class for this period. Thank you very much. And thank you on my own. Thank you for attending the class. Please, let's hear from every one of us. Please, you can unmute your mic and just speak up.
To be more sensitive in handling data, whether it's research data, client data that I have custody of, and realizing that the data is not just about me. The data is about the clients I'm serving. The data is about the research respondents that have willingly volunteered their data or volunteered their responses to whatever study I'm conducting. And I think to a reasonable extent, also with regards to the responsible use of automations, the responsible use of AI. AI is becoming something that is everywhere nowadays, and sometimes we are so busy, or maybe I say I could be so busy, I find myself dedicating certain things to AI, so to say. But, and something you said right now, that correctness does not necessarily mean ethical, right? And so being able to put the human part of me into whatever I do more and become less reliant on AI. I love particularly the TED Talk and the perspective the presenter brought to the whole picture of being afraid of losing one's job to AI, right? Because or automation, as the case may be, because that's like a huge threat. But then there are things these machines cannot do that we are wired to do. But by the time we get too reliant on them, I dare say that that humane part of us becomes dumb. It, it becomes dulled. It is dampened. It is like repressed because we are no longer expressing ourselves, our humaneness. We are like relying so much on um, the automation and all of that. And so I found that TED Talk very instructive, and knowing that I am smarter than the AI, I am smarter than the machine because I have the human part, the emotional part, the part that can be empathetic that the machine does not have. And oftentimes when we serve people. We are not serving just the wood and the blocks and tables. We are serving people with emotions. And once we can connect with them, I mean, even in business, it shows that our business will thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Please, someone else could come in. Thank you for your thoughts. So can we have someone else speak? Okay, I think your hand is raised up. You could unmute your mic.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, and thanks for everyone and those who speak before me. Actually, yeah, I think it's a high time to celebrate our commitment so far, especially you, Professor. You did a lot of things related to the course that we cover. Actually, what I would like, what I'm so much knowledge from your side, your consistency from beginning to the end. Second, that you're being reminding the the student about the schedule. You learn that we have found ourselves in different time zone. So reminding or sending a message about the class also is very good thing. Thirdly, you sending the document on right time that make us just to receive and work on our assignment. Despite that, sometimes we'll be late with all those things. This is not is our own problem. It's not the matter of coordination. Your leadership really you show to the level where we are not where we need to work to improve ourselves to get there. So when we come to the course, really, I love the course so much because what I love so much is not is about we learn America culture and we learn also the challenging that particular American and big company was faced for a number of years related to the ethical responsibility and accountability and data insecurity and all and so on up to we reach the level today where we learn about the AI. Yeah, the whole world actually is afraid what direction really the world is about to go. And even this one is a big question for every country and every leaders about what will be the next because AI, roboting, and everything now, taking a lot of role that making the people not have opportunity so much to work on those particular things. Actually, comparing machine and human being, we are quite different. Unless what make human being more better than machine is ethical, because we are emotional being until we also adaptable, but the machine cannot work the way we think. But if the owner of the company thought that machine is better than us and send the people home, so this one will bring another issue in the term of ethical and policy that need to be put in place. And we learn all those things. And then to make it short, of course, our class will not be ending here. It is something that we need to practice, and then we need to evaluate all those data we used to collect, what the benefit of it. Particularly, what I love so much about this one is the course we have took last week. We was talking about the indigenous severity of indigenous data. And then I realized that a lot of data was collected from the community or never go from the community who don't have those, do not own those data in their hand now. So when you need it, you need to process with a lot of money. And then those people are just doing whatever they want with our data there, but the owner does not have this one. And this one, we need to work on it on ourselves and then find a way to have our own data where we will control it and then save in the way that the people who want to get it, they need to get it from they need to get it in the right way that they can take accountability not to share with anyone else. So those are my takeaway. And then all in all, yes, I thank you so much, Professor, for your commitment to make us to build in this way after we complete the course. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I deeply appreciate it. Thank you very much. Please, can we have the next person in the class to share your thoughts with us? I think we have Sophia Shegun Queen. I'm referring to our original student, Akintoye.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Really, I don't have much to say, but um, regarding the woman, that's Francis Facebook matter, I think she did ideally, if one is not in agreement with what organization is doing and you have made them know that this thing is not right, before you castigate them publicly, the best way out is to first of all resign. And this is exactly what the woman did. She escalated the issue within the organization. She raised the thing. They did not listen to her. Then she made sure that she copied evidence and resigned voluntarily, and then went ahead to make the world know, which is perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's a very nice observation. Yeah, you have to resign first since you are not in agreement before you do what you need to do. I think we just take two more before we end the class. We have already hit our max time of 21 o'clock GMT. Sophia and Queen, are you with us? Could you unmute your mic? Okay. So maybe we'll give the floor to any other person that wish to say something. Okay, yeah. So for the sake of time, let's just go through it again. As summary, what to take away from this week and the entire course. We said that number one, human oversight is ethically required for high stakes, irreversible, dignity affecting decisions. Automation accuracy should not and does not substitute for human accountability. Number two, automation's ethical arm goes beyond job displacement. It includes impact on dignity, identity, purpose, and community that GDP cannot measure. So when in leadership position and you are to make that decision or to influence it, replacing humans with automation, please work with ethics and a sense of purpose in mind. Number three, ethical organization culture requires more than policy. It requires psychological safety, aligned incentive, leadership and accountability, and ongoing training. We talked of the 6-step ethical decision framework, and we see that it provides practical guidance for navigating real professionalism dilemmas when faced with pressure. We said, number one, name it. If there's an issue, spot it out, identify and map the stakeholders involved, apply the framework which you have learned, name the pressures, apply what we call the transparency test, and documentation, very important. Next, whistleblowing is a last resort. Whistleblowing should always be a last resort. And of course, sometimes it's the only option available when internal channels fail and serious harm is being caused. Every week we went through this course, it prepared us for the same thing, being a data professional who can be trusted with power over other people's information. We should be trusted when we are in charge of data that has to do with people's private information. In fact, people's information, because we don't define what is private. The respondent define what is private. Please, very importantly, as much as this is a, training course and training program, we shouldn't forget that it is also an academic program for those of you that enrolled for academic purposes. So the LMS, you have the final assignment, the reflective thoughts, the discussional forum. It will be uploaded in about few hours from now. Please, let's round up everything latest by Tuesday, because by Tuesday night, that is next week, 11:59 GMT, the entire system would be shut down for grading purposes. So till we meet, you have my email address, the Siri email. I will also send us via mail my personal email and contact details in case we need to connect outside the learning environment. So thank you very much for being part of this class. I was honored to be part of this journey. In fact, I also learned when preparing for the course each week, I had to take my own lessons, learn it before coming to engage with us. So thank you for having me. Thank you for showing up each day. I know how it must be coming back from your various work and logging on to class. Equally, it's also the same for me, but thank you for constantly showing up and have a very blessed day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
I was in my mid-20s the first time I realized that I could be replaced by a robot. At the time, I was working as a financial reporter covering Wall Street and the stock market, and one day I heard about this new AI reporting app. Basically, you just feed in some data like a corporate financial report or a database of real estate listings, and the app would automatically strip out all the important parts, plug it into a news story, and publish it with no human input required. Now, these AI reporting apps, they weren't going to win any Pulitzer Prizes, but they were shockingly effective. Major news organizations were already starting to use them, and one company said that its AI reporting app had been used to write 300 million news stories in a single year, which is slightly more than me, and probably more than every human journalist on Earth combined. For the last few years, I've been researching this coming wave of AI and automation, and I've learned that what happened to me that day is happening to workers in all kinds of industries, no matter how seemingly prestigious or high-paid their jobs are. Doctors are learning that machine learning algorithms can now diagnose certain types of cancers more accurately than they can. Lawyers are going up against legal AIs that can spot issues in contracts with better precision than them. Recently at Google, they ran an experiment with an AI that trains neural networks, essentially a robot that makes other robots. And they found that these AI